Welcome back. This is part 2 of the concentration code. I'm Dr. Alfred Ricks Jr. You can find more detailed information on this subject in my book, The Concentration Code. This video explains what concentration actually means and why most clinicians never get it. The problem is that you can calculate it, but you cannot see it. You've taken the total milligrams in a bag divided by the total volume in milliliters and written down the answer. Doing the calculation and understanding what it means are entirely two different things, and most clinicians never bridge that gap. You're not just running fluids, you're delivering a specific density of drug through a tube and into a human body at a rate that determines whether that patient stabilizes, crashes, or recovers. The concentration in that bag isn't just a number on a label, it's a physical reality. It's how much drug is packed into every single milliliter of fluid flowing towards your patient right now. Most clinicians can't picture that. You know the formula, it produces the right number. You don't know what the number means in terms of what is actually flowing into your patient. Concentration. The simplest way to think about concentration is simply how much drug is dissolved in how much fluid. That's the whole concept. Everything else is just applying that idea to different numbers. Juice concentrate works the same way. The can in the freezer is a dense, syrupy liquid. You add 1 can of water and you have a thick, concentrated juice drink. You add 3 cans of water, and suddenly you have a full pitcher of a less concentrated juice. Add that juice to a swimming pool, and it's so dilute, the small concentration, you can't even taste it. The drug amount has stayed the same. The volume increased, so the concentration dropped. This is exactly what happens when a pharmacist dilutes a medication into a larger bag. The total drug doesn't change, the volume does, and that changes what the patient gets per milliliter. IV medication works exactly this way. If you dissolve 4 milligrams of a drug in 250 milliliters of saline, you get 1 concentration. If you dissolve 8 milligrams of the same drug into 250 milliliters of saline, you get a concentration that's exactly twice as strong. The bags look identical, the volume is the same, the fluid is the same color, but every milliliter of that second bag contains twice as much drug as every milliliter of the first. If the pump is running at the same rate for both bags, the patient on the second bag is getting twice the dose. That's not a subtle difference. In a vasopressor context, that difference is between a stable blood pressure and a hypertensive crisis. Here's another way to think about it. Take salt water. If you dissolve 1 teaspoon of salt into a glass of water, you get mildly salty water. If you dissolve 4 teaspoons of salt into the same glass, you get water that's intensely salty. The glass is the same size, the water looks the same, but the concentration of salt is 4 times higher. Anyone who takes a sip of the second glass knows immediately that something is different. That instant recognition is what you're building for in IV medications. Not a sip taste, obviously, but the same kind of immediate, intuitive understanding that tells you what's concentrated and what's dilute before you run a single calculation. Now, these examples aren't just cute comparisons. They're the mental foundation for everything. The moment you stop thinking about concentration as a formula and start thinking about it as a drug density, the whole concept becomes intuitive. A more concentrated bag means more drug per milliliter. A more dilute bag means less drug per milliliter. That single idea, held clearly in your mind, is the basis of every calculation, every error check, and every clinical decision you make about IV medications. Now, take milligrams and micrograms. Milligrams is more than micrograms. mg stands for milligrams, mcg stands for micrograms. The two units you'll see most often at the bedside are the milligrams per milliliter and micrograms per milliliter. Both of them are just ways of expressing the same thing, and that is how much drug is in each milliliter of fluid. The difference between them is simply the size of the unit being used to measure the drug. Milligrams per milliliter mean there are a certain number of milligrams of drug in every milliliter of fluid. If a bag is labeled 2 milligrams per milliliter, every single milliliter of that fluid contains 2 milligrams of drug. If you run 10 milliliters per hour, you're delivering 20 milligrams of drug per hour. Run 20 milliliters per hour and you're delivering 40 milligrams per hour. The relationship is direct and simple. More volume per hour means more drug per hour, and the concentration tells you exactly how much drug comes with each milliliter. Micrograms per milliliter works the same way. It's just a smaller unit. 1 milligram is equal to 1,000 micrograms. So if a bag has a concentration of 16 micrograms per milliliter, every milliliter contains 16 micrograms of drug. That might sound like a tiny amount, and for many emergency drugs it is, which is exactly why we use micrograms. Drugs like epinephrine, norepinephrine, and fentanyl are active at very small dosages. Measuring them in milligrams would give you numbers like 0.016 milligrams per milliliter, which is harder to work with mentally than 16 micrograms per milliliter. The units get chosen to make the numbers practical at the bedside. Converting between the two is straightforward once you know the relationship. To go from milligrams to micrograms, you just multiply by 1,000. To go from micrograms to milligrams, you divide by 1,000. That's it. In another video in this series, I'll show you how to mentally calculate and convert these units fast and with ease. A bag labeled 0.016 milligrams per milliliter is the same as 16 micrograms per milliliter. A bag labeled 0.032 milligrams per milliliter is the same as 32 micrograms per milliliter. You'll use this conversion constantly, and after a while, it'll become automatic. Let's take a real IV bag, for example. Dopamine is commonly mixed as 400 milligrams and 250 milliliters of D5W. To find the concentration in milligrams per milliliter, you divide by 400. You divide the 400 by 250, which gives you 1.6 milligrams per milliliter. To convert it to micrograms, you multiply by 1,000, which gives you 1,600 micrograms per milliliter. Now, every milliliter of that dopamine bag contains 1,600 micrograms of drug. If your pump is running at 15 milliliters an hour, you're delivering 24,000 micrograms per hour, or 400 micrograms per minute. Whether that's the right dose depends on your patient's weight and the ordered dose in micrograms per kilogram per minute. But the point is that you can get to this number quickly and cleanly once you understand what the concentration label actually means. Another common example is norepinephrine, mixed as 4 milligrams in 250 milliliters. 4 divided by 250, and you get 0.016 milligrams per milliliter. Multiply 1,000 and you get 16 micrograms per milliliter. Now you know that every milliliter of that bag contains 16 micrograms of norepinephrine. When you're titrating that drip at the bedside, every adjustment in milliliters per hour translates into a predictable change in micrograms per minute delivered to the patient. That predictability is what makes safe titration possible. You're not guessing. You're working from a known concentration that you can hold clearly in your mind. The key habit to build right now is reading concentration labels aloud when you pick up a bag. Not just the drug name, not just the volume, the actual concentration. Say it loud. Norepinephrine, 4 milligrams in 250 milliliter, that's 16 micrograms per milliliter. Do that every time you hang a drip for the next 2 weeks and watch how quickly it becomes automatic. You're not just reading a label, you're training your brain to connect the numbers on the outside of the bag with the drug density inside the bag. Total drug and total volume. It's the relationship that runs everything. There's one mathematical relationship in IV pharmacology that underlies everything else. Concentration is equal total drug divided by total volume. Write it down, say it out loud, then understand it deeply, because every calculation in this series flows from it. Concentration is equal total drug divided by total volume. If you have 8 milligrams of drug in 250 milliliters of fluid, the concentration is 8 divided by 250, which equals 0.032 milligrams per milliliter, or 32 micrograms per milliliter. If you have that same 8 milligrams, but now it's in 500 milliliters of fluid, the concentration is 8 milligrams divided by 500, which equals 0.016 milligrams, or 16 micrograms. Same drug amount, double the volume, half the concentration. The patient receiving that second bag at the same pump rate as the first bag gets half the dose per hour. Now that's a clinically significant difference and exactly the kind of error that happens during bag changes when the pharmacist sends a different volume than usual and nobody recalculates. This relationship also works in reverse, and that's where it becomes truly powerful. If you know the concentration and the volume, you can find the total dose. If you know the concentration and the total dose, you can find the volume. The formula rearranges in all three directions, and each direction answers a different question. How much drug is in the bag? What volume do I need to make a specific concentration? What concentration did I end up with after mixing? This isn't about being good at math. It's about being fast enough and confident enough to work with whatever is in front of you. Standard concentrations makes life easier, but emergencies don't always deliver standard concentration. The clinician who understands the underlying relationship can work with any bag, any concentration, any situation. Practice this right now. Take any bag you've hung recently and work through the relationship from memory. What was the total drug? What was the total volume? What was the concentration in milligrams per milliliter? What was it in micrograms per milliliter? If you can answer all four questions without looking anything up, you're already building the mental model. Here are 5 core ideas, and each one builds directly on the last. First, concentration is a visual concept before it's a mathematical one. The ability to picture drug density in a bag is the foundation of these clinical skills. Second, milligrams per milliliter and micrograms per milliliter are simply different sized units for expressing the same thing. How much drug is in each milliliter of fluid? Converting between them requires only one step, and that step becomes automatic with repetition. Third, the relationship that concentration equals total drug divided by total volume is the single most important equation in IV pharmacology. It governs every calculation, every bag change, and every emergency mixing decision you'll ever make. Fourth, changing either the drug amount or the fluid volume changes the concentration, and changes the concentration without adjusting the pump rate changes the dose the patient receives. This is where most clinical errors originate, and understanding the relationship clearly is what prevents them. Fifth, the concentration ladder is your mental visualization tool. It gives every bag a position based on its drug density, and it trains your instinct to recognize when something doesn't belong where you expect it. Join me in part 3 of this series on the concentration code, where the topic is unit conversions at the speed of thought and mental shortcuts that actually work in a code. You can find more detailed information on this subject in my book, The Concentration Code.